House Democrats are pushing through with the public phase of their impeachment inquiry against President Trump. House Intelligence Chair Adam Schiff put out the timeline for public hearings. They are set to begin next week. Two Trump administration officials will testify next Wednesday: the top U.S. envoy to Ukraine, William Taylor, and the Deputy Assistant Secretary of European and Russian Affairs, George Kent. Next Friday, former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, will speak. Congressman Schiff described what he's been hearing behind closed doors and what the public can expect to hear next week.
We are getting an increasing appreciation for just what took place during the course of the last year and the degree to which the president enlisted whole departments of government in the illicit aim of trying to get Ukraine to dig up dirt on a political opponent, as well as further conspiracy theory about the 2016 election that he believed would be beneficial to his re-election campaign.
More closed-door depositions are also being made public. The House Intelligence Committee released the transcript from Bill Taylor's testimony. The diplomat said he was concerned about the multiple channels the Trump administration used in its foreign policy with Ukraine, particularly concerning the involvement of the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. This all comes one day after a pair of disappointing elections for Republicans. In Kentucky, Democratic Attorney General Andy Beshear is declaring victory over Republican Governor Matt Bevin. And Bevin is requesting a re-canvass of votes in the race. President Trump campaigned for Bevin in Kentucky Monday night. He told the crowd in Lexington that if Republicans lose, quote, they are going to say Trump suffered the greatest defeat in the history of the world. You can't let that happen to me. Meanwhile, in Virginia, Democrats won control of both chambers of the state legislature. The state's Democratic Governor Ralph Northam celebrated the victory. For the first time since 1993, Democrats control the state legislature and the governorship. According to the Washington Post, the results in Kentucky embarrassed the president and worried many other Republicans ahead of next year's elections. Robert Costa writes, the defeat underscores the bind Republicans are in, saying President Trump, quote, continues to dominate the party, but many lawmakers are uneasy about their ability to defend his conduct and hold on to suburban support. Anita Kumar and Siobhan Hughes join me now. Anita is a White House correspondent and associate editor for Politico. She's with us from their Arlington, Virginia newsroom. And Siobhan covers Congress for the Wall Street Journal. She joins us now from Capitol Hill. Welcome to you both. Siobhan, President Trump held an event today in the apparent hopes of reassuring Republicans about his administration's success. He touted his lifetime appointments to the federal judiciary. Is that likely to subdue the reported concerns among Republicans on Capitol Hill?
It sounds more like he's channeling Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, as you just mentioned. That is one of the chief selling points McConnell has used to rally Republicans around the party. It certainly does work with a segment of that population, but it's hard to say that is enough.
Well, Anita, are you hearing any concerns from inside the White House after last night's elections?
There are some concerns, not just for the governorship, because a lot of people have talked about how the governor was particularly unpopular. But as you mentioned, Virginia and some other races around the country where they feel like the races were about President Trump, even though these were local and state races, that they were largely national issues. People were talking about President Trump and voting about him. And, you know, so there are fears that the votes, the elections for the next years will be about President Trump, and that he's not helping the cause and not helping Republicans turn out the vote. So there are some signs that they are worried about this. And, you know, these are always these not even midterm elections, these are the midterm elections,
right,
are
exactly.
always the signal about what's going to happen next. So there are people bracing for what those next elections will be like.
Meantime, Siobhan, the State Department's third-ranking official, David Hale, testified privately on Capitol Hill today. Why did members of Congress want to hear from Hale, and what did he tell them?
So members of Congress wanted to hear from Hale because he was in the middle of conversations about whether Secretary of State Mike Pompeo should show support for beleaguered U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Marie Yovanovitch. And according to reporting from outlets such as PBS and the Washington Post, what we know is Mr. Hale said that the State Department top brass felt it would be damaging to the relationship with Ukraine because it would alienate Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal attorney.
Interesting. And Siobhan, turning back to the Bill Taylor transcripts, what did we learn about what Taylor said about a quid pro quo between the United States and Ukraine?
Mr. Taylor said that it was very clear that there was a quid pro quo. He had absolutely no doubt about that. That runs counter to what some other people have said, but it is a chief reason Mr. Taylor is going to be the star witness next week for the Democrats.
So, Anita, where does that leave the state of the impeachment process heading into public testimony next week?
Well, the House Democrats really want to sort of put their best foot forward. They want to show the public next week some of their best witnesses, the most influential and key witnesses, as you just mentioned. So it will be people that are directly connecting this aid, foreign aid to Ukraine, to what the president was asking for the country to look into Joe Biden and his son, Hunter Biden. It will also be people that there will also be testimony about what the administration was willing to do. So they were willing to sideline other people, career diplomats who had experience in Ukraine, sideline them so that the president and his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, could sort of take over foreign policy for that country. So they want to outline specifically what they've heard, taking those most influential pieces of information and laying it out for the public.
And Siobhan, help us understand, Anita touched on it a moment ago, but is there a sense as to why these three people in particular are the first ones to appear publicly?
They make the strongest case for the Democrats, in particular Bill Taylor. He was a devoted note taker, and so every time he had a conversation or an email with somebody, he would record that in a little notebook. And so he speaks not only with his own near-perfect recall, but with the benefit of notes. The other thing about Bill Taylor is he was privy to a lot of information because even though he was part of the regular State Department channel, he interacted a great deal with Gordon Sondland and Kurt Volker, two individuals who were part of that irregular channel. And on top of it, because he was getting briefings from officials such as Tim Morrison back at the NSC, he was privy to details about conversations that people like Gordon Sondland had directly with President Trump. So Bill Taylor's testimony is about as firsthand as it is going to get for the Democrats, and he's crucial for them.
Siobhan, this morning our chief congressional correspondent Nancy Cortez asked Ohio Republican Congressman Jim Jordan about the 5 witnesses who now say there was a quid pro quo between President Trump and Ukraine. Here's his response.
We have the definitive account on all this is the one from Ambassador Volker. Who was this? Well, he was the special envoy to Ukraine. He was the guy who was in this each and every day working on these issues. And it's interesting. That's the one transcript you all don't want to talk about.
But the ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor, says there was a quid.
Ambassador Volker says there wasn't. The call. I trust the call. I trust President Zelensky and President Trump, and I trust the fact that the Ukrainians didn't know that aid had been held, and Ukrainians did nothing to get it released when it was released.
So, Siobhan, help us understand here. Why is Jordan siding with Volker's account over the others?
Well, number one, Volker helps Republicans make their case more than the Democrat. If you look at his transcript, Kurt Volker says there wasn't really a quid pro quo, and that while certainly it would have been helpful if the Ukrainian president had issued some sort of statement about an investigation, it wasn't necessary to secure a White House meeting. And so quid pro quo is far too strong of a linkage to make. Mr. Volker is also important because he buttresses another plank of the Republican argument that none of this mattered because the military aid was likely to be released anyway. And so Mr. Volker has a way of minimizing what Republicans view as too much fanfare on the part of Democrats.
And Siobhan, does Jordan's explanation sort of stand up when you hear him spell out the reason why this emphasis for him is on Volker?
Well, there are a lot of witnesses who would see it far differently from Volker, and a piece of this is going to be a credibility test. On balance, the judgment possibly may go to these other witnesses. What Jim Jordan does have going for him, though, is the fact that so many people have not testified on the orders of the White House, and those are people who could provide much more direct evidence. On top of that, all of those documents, those emails at the State Department are being closely held. Those haven't been released, and so some of the information that could really weaken Jim Jordan's argument at this point is just not available.
Anita, so enter into this story now another familiar name. We've learned that former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi is expected to join the White House communications team to work on impeachment messaging. Remind us of who Bondi is and what her past connections with President Trump are.
Right. Well, the president and Pam Bondi have had quite a long relationship. She supported him during the election, and he has actually considered putting her into his cabinet or administration a couple times last year. If you'll recall, when the attorney general was fired, had left, there was some talk that he was going to appoint her. She has resisted joining the administration, though. She's out of office. She had been working in the private sector, but she didn't want to actually come to the White House, but said that the president personally asked her, and so she felt that she needed to fulfill that role.
Interesting. Anita, we have, well, is the White House, first of all, changing its impeachment strategy at all now that public testimony is set to begin?
Well, as you know, most of the strategy is about what President Trump says, and he's had about half a dozen strategies or messages that he's been putting out there, all different things. But I think the sign that Pam Bondi is coming aboard means that the president and the White House officials, top officials, have finally been listening to Trump allies and the campaign and other people who are very concerned that not only does the president not have one single message, but these surrogates and Republican members on Capitol Hill have not been able to just hone in on a message and say, this is where we think this is going and this is what the message should be. They've been sort of all over the map. They've been reluctant to appear on TV. The president has been very frustrated that more Republicans aren't out there pushing for him and fighting for him. So I think that her coming on board is going to help. She'll be on TV pushing for him, but she'll also help recruit others to do the same.
All right, it'll be interesting to see if and how that impeachment messaging changes from the White House. Anita Kumar and Siobhan Hughes, thanks to you both. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.